A change in mindset from thriving to surviving. Changing our mindset from thriving to surviving. Hello, y'all. I'm Diana Brienne. You know, I'm always talking about thriving. I'm always talking about going from surviving to thriving, because I think that's the ideal way to live life. And yet, what happens when we go from thriving to surviving? You know, life can knock people down no matter how high they get. It can knock them down financially. It can knock them down health-wise. It can knock out a relationship. There are some things that are out of our control, and some things are within our control. And I think it's important to know the difference. But what happens when you've done everything right in life and yet the chair was pulled out from underneath you, so to speak? Well, I truly believe that when times like that happens, we've got to learn to survive. Ultimately, yes, we want to thrive. And yet that may not be a possibility at that moment or at that time frame. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about when we have to survive in life. Let's say that we got a diagnosis, and pray that we never do. And yet, if that was the case, if that was the situation, and we got a diagnosis. So now we're in the mode of surviving rather than thriving. Can we thrive at the same time? Sure we can. We can thrive in certain areas of our lives, but often we have to pull together all of our resources, our energy, our time, our momentum, and put it on a certain situation that calls for survival. It could be that financially things just fell apart and now everything is changing. Or a relationship that we relied on completely fell apart for one reason or another, and now we don't have that relationship to depend on. So when life falls apart and we have to go from thriving, where everything is wonderful and we're going up, to just surviving, to making do, to trying to tread water. I believe that we have to get into that mindset, the mindset of positivity, that we're going to be okay, that ultimately we're going to come through this. This is, in the meantime, it's surviving. And there are times in life that we have to survive. It can come from any aspect of life. You know, the world is always changing, and we can't always predict what's going to happen in the world. And so I believe that when we have to survive, when we go from thriving to surviving, and we have to go into that mentality, it is a mentality, a survival mentality versus a thriving mentality. They're very different mentalities. Thriving is going up, and you're focused on all the future events and that are going to happen and that you're going to create. Surviving is trying to make do for right now in hopes that you will get back at some point to thriving. And so I believe that it's important to know how to do both. You know, growing up, we were poor. We knew how to survive, though. My mama knew how to stretch $1, and she knew how to take a box of grits and make all kinds of things out of it, and a bag of potatoes. We knew how to survive. And a lot of people today only know how to thrive. They don't even really realize that they're thriving because, well, they're so used to it. But do they really know how to survive in almost any area of life? If, you know, anything happened in life, could they survive it? Do they have the tools? You know, I always gave my kids, I always taught them, I said, you know, if the world fell apart, I'm going to teach you how to take a bag of potatoes and make a meal out of it, or make many meals out of a bag of potatoes, or a box of grits, or a box of cornmeal. You know, I taught my kids basic life skills. And, you know, we hear a lot about people who prep, you know, stock up food, generators, things like that. And a lot of people do things like that. And that's one way of they're anticipating survival rather than thrival or thriving. And so people have different ways of comprehending surviving, and what may be surviving to one may be thriving to another, what may be thriving to another may be surviving for another person. But I think it's good to understand the concepts of surviving and thriving and understand how to do both. How to, if life is thrown into a tailspin, that we know how to survive, that we know how to manage, that we know how to get by until we can thrive again. And I believe that we all want to thrive. I love to thrive. I talk about thriving. Don't get stuck in survival mentality. Be stuck in thrival mentality. And yet, when we get stuck in thrival mentality and we have to survive, we can sink. So it's important to know how to survive so that we can thrive. So what happens when we go from thriving to surviving? I think a lot happens. It's an emotional adjustment, emotional change. And yet, I think if we have the skills in place in whatever area of life that we have to go through, whatever crisis a person goes through, where they're going from the thriving mode to the surviving mode, I think it starts with a mindset, a positive mindset that we will get through this. From my house to yours, may God bless you, and I hope to talk to you soon again. Bye-bye.